In tonight's vice presidential debate, J.D. Vance had one goal: to try and clean up the mess left by his running mate after the first disastrous debate in front of 75 million people. It doesn't take long before you realize whether he was able to accomplish that goal. So first off, here's J.D. Vance trying to dance around the issue of climate change.
I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world.
He claimed that we need to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible and produce as much American energy as possible. And he's right. And that is exactly what Harris and Biden are doing right now. The current administration's created 800,000 manufacturing jobs, and the current administration is producing the most energy ever. The U.S. right now is the most energy independent it's ever been, including when Donald Trump was president. Meanwhile, if J.D. Vance is advocating for reshoring manufacturing jobs, great, but how does he square that with the fact that his running mate lost 150,000 manufacturing jobs when he was president? Walz, to his credit, also made another great point when it comes to climate change.
Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax, and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy.
And then, of course, if you're wondering why Trump and Vance are so willing to shill for big oil, well, you don't have to look far.
To call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want.
Bought and paid for. From there, they delved into the issue of immigration, which of course is where we had the misfortune of listening to Trump's tirade about migrants eating pets. But it's important to note that the story was perpetuated by J.D. Vance prior to that. And of course, Vance's staff had already been told by the city of Springfield that it wasn't true, but still he said it because the point, according to his own admission on air, is that even if he has to create fake stories, it's worth it to impact the narrative. And so, of course, when asked about immigration, here's what Vance had to say.
Before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations.
Deport millions of people, including those who have protected status and who are legal immigrants, without any details about how he would actually do it. Because after all, why worry about details when you have no intention of actually following the law? In reality, the reason there is chaos as far as immigration is concerned is expressly because Donald Trump killed the border bill that would have actually mitigated those issues, a point that Tim Walz made here.
Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things?
In fact, the moderators did offer a minor fact check about the legal status of migrants in Springfield, which sent Vance into a tailspin.
Just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status.
Right.
temporary protected
Well,
status.
Margaret, but
Thank you.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
We're
because
going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys weren't
economy,
going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me,
Notice how he complains about being fact-checked. When your entire platform is predicated on lying, I suppose you're going to get upset when you get called out for lying. And then, in what I believe was one of Walls's best moments of the debate.
Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president?
The only thing worse than having a megalomaniacal narcissist in office who thinks that he can fix everything alone is having an incompetent megalomaniacal narcissist in office who thinks he can fix everything alone. Trump has no actual record to run on, just a lot of branding. But dig 1 inch beneath the surface and you'll realize that there's nothing there. On abortion, here's what Vance had to say.
First of all, I never supported a national ban. I did, when I was running for Senate in 2022, talk about setting some minimum national standard.
Vance says he never supported a national ban, but he supported a national minimum standard, otherwise known as, you guessed it, a ban. You can't make a national minimum standard of 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks and think that you are tricking anyone into thinking that that's somehow not a ban. The fact is that Vance is arguably the most extreme on this issue. He himself called for a, quote, end to abortion on his website. And Walz was quick not to let Vance explain away this issue.
The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography?
And here's a particularly bad issue for Republicans, the issue of gun violence. Here's Vance's big solution.
What do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer.
The old harden the schools trope in response to a question about gun violence. Right, that's the answer. Turn schools into prisons, rife with guns and metal detectors, because God forbid we actually tackle the root of the problem. And Walz, to his big credit, pointed that out here.
But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense.
And it just got better for Walz as we then moved into healthcare. Vance claimed that Trump, quote, salvaged the ACA. That didn't exactly sit too well with Walz.
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill.
And look, Republicans, as you all know, have spent the last decade trying to repeal the ACA. Trump himself literally tried to repeal it, and but for John McCain's famous thumbs down, he would have been successful. Trump is not the savior of the ACA. He is not the savior of healthcare in this country. He literally tried to destroy it. And of course, it couldn't get much worse than this answer on Vance's vowed refusal to certify the election unless Donald Trump wins.
Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship.
And look, of course Vance won't admit that Donald Trump lost in 2020 because that lie right there serves as the foundation for not only Trump's efforts to massage his ego as far as his 2020 loss is concerned, but also the foundation for his efforts to cry fraud in the upcoming election. If Vance admits that Donald Trump lost, then the whole facade goes away. And so instead, he has to help Donald Trump continue this bit because it's all that Donald Trump has left in the event that he loses this election. He will never admit fault, and he will never claim that he lost the election.
We all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda.
Overall, this debate put on full display the extent to which J.D. Vance is little more than a slicker-talking proxy for the exact same dangerous, draconian, backwards agenda that Donald Trump tried to thrust onto the American people. Whether it's on healthcare, on gun safety, on reproductive rights, or on democracy itself, Vance offered little more than the same unpopular policies as Donald Trump himself. Americans have already made it clear that they don't want it from him, and they're not going to buy it from his running mate either. Before you go, just a quick note, if you'd like to see more of my content, which is always free of advertising, sponsorships, and paywalls, please make sure to subscribe to this channel using the subscribe button right here on the screen. And if you'd like to support my work even further, you can grab a copy of my instant #1 New York Times selling book, Shameless, available for sale right now. That link is also on the screen. Thanks so much for watching.